Welcome. My name is Christopher Peter and I am a political economist providing a common-sense perspective on salient current events. Happy birthday to my home, the United States of America. The beacon of freedom, the land of opportunity, the greatest source of good ever in the history of humankind. I am proud to be a first-generation American, born here to parents of immigrants who came to this nation for opportunity and contributed to our society. I truly believe that no nation in the world gives people the opportunities that we enjoy here. Not to say that other nations are not great in their own way, but none live up to what we enjoy in the United States, which is why more people want to come here than any nation in the world. Freedom, opportunity, and security that is standard in America is like no other. We have our issues, but we cannot lose the forest through the trees and end up a desert. In this special episode, we celebrate America and discuss ideas to make American greatness sustainable and free from radicalism. So, let us begin our diverse discussion of issues in another special episode of The Review. Why we need to put patriotism above our politics. I am a proud American born to immigrant parents who came to the United States legally for opportunity, and more importantly, safety and security afforded here. Parents who contributed to my local community, helping our neighbors and schools regardless of demographics or political affiliation. Just helping people because it was the right thing to do. Despite them being raised overseas, they embraced American culture, and more importantly our American values, blending cultural traditions as well. But I learned from an early age that there is a great number of people who love America and desire to be Americans because of what we stand for, the opportunities we have, and the ability to determine their own future. The guests visiting the United States for the World Cup exemplify that same spirit as they provide some perspective on how America is truly great and should be appreciated. The countless videos of soccer fans who are in awe of the excesses of American life compared to what is common to their daily experience should be an eye-opener for those who hold strong negative emotions for our nation. People love America. It also explains why so many people want to move to the United States and choose freedom, capitalism, and democracy over the socialist regimes they were fleeing. People who want a different life choose to come to a nation that sees them as people, not victims, not subjects, but people who are capable and dynamic and hold them to being just that. We are seeing there are a considerable number of people in the fringes of the left who hold irrational and radical views, embracing politics that people who live under those ideals who caution you from being sympathetic to politics that have caused so much harm and the lives of millions of people. People in our society who were born into comfortable lives rejecting American culture in favor of a false social vision created by hopeful dictators. I think it is important for Americans to understand why you should love our great nation, even if political outcomes go in the direction of what you prefer. Sometimes you will be on the prevailing side, other times not, and in America, the rights of either side are equally protected, not like what you see in true socialist nations. Americans should always love our great nation regardless of political outcomes or the tense debates that define the moment. When you actually look past the noise and experience the United States of America, you see that we have a great society, great economy, and most importantly a great population of generous and kind fellow Americans that are more similar than different to us. Our politics are loud, emotional, and intense, but we should never let hysteria guide how we feel for our great nation, our unifying principles, or shade how we interpret facts, evidence, and data. There are too many people being driven by messaging focused on political hate rather than substantive policy. In fact, political hate is used to cover radical ideas. There is no rational argument against our American values, our way of life, our economics, or how we protect the good in the world. Rather, distortions of events, slanted arguments, and exploitation of those who are stuck in the mental prison of seeing themselves as victims have made people susceptible to ideas that have only seen failure, caused great harm, and oppressed so many. If you have a placard on your lawn stating hate has no place there but you wish harm on those who hold different political views than you or others who are more successful than you, then hate is already in that home. If you believe there is a monarchy simply because an election result did not go your way, but cheer for an actual monarch, then you may have serious issues to address with a licensed professional. The United States of America is the greatest nation in the world. The combined freedom, opportunity, and security, along with the dynamic experiences only available here, makes our great homeland stand out. Americans should celebrate our history and how we overcome past mistakes, and let us come together to continue to ensure future generations have freedoms, opportunity, and security that is the best in the world.
The keystone value in the United States is freedom and the right to self-determine our way of life and economic pursuits. It is a foundational principle that is so unique in the world and highly desirable. Many nations do not afford their citizens true freedom, and many people want to leave those nations and come to the United States to escape iron-fisted oppressive governance that is a staple of socialist regimes. Freedom. Consider the freedom of speech we enjoy in the United States. Right now, it seems like the United States is the only nation where people can speak their minds, voice their opinions without fear of retribution in the form of prosecution. The same freedom of speech these socialists use to make radical claims and spew blatant lies. End quote. In Europe right now, we are seeing people being arrested for stating facts that the government deems inconvenient or troubling. You cannot speak out against the government or the protected classes in many nations in Europe right now. In other areas, you could be potentially jailed or worse for criticizing the head of state. Americans understand, for the most part, that we do not have to like the speech someone makes, but they have the right to speak their mind. And we have the right to counter that speech and provide an alternative argument. The best solution to misinformation and disinformation is someone providing speech that is based on facts, evidence, and data. Not censorship. We do not have to like what someone has to say to accept that they have the freedom to say it. And their right to speech does not negate another person's right to call out the points of difference. There is the ability to have a discourse without retribution from the government. Now, other institutions like employers or sponsors have their speech right to make it clear that they do not associate or support said speech. In America, we also have the right to live our lives in the manner of our choosing. In many nations, there are punishments for what they deem moral crimes. But, in the United States, there is a great level of freedom to choose your path in life. Now, there are some people that mistake freedom to do something as a requirement for others to champion their choices. Another person does not have to support your life choices and should not be coerced to cover the costs for it. But, you have the right to exist and not be charged with crimes for that choice as long as it does not harm another person. For all those people under the Queers for Gaza, they do not understand that in the Gaza region, there are harsh penalties for their lifestyle. A bit of irony. Furthermore, we have the right to choose what faith we want to practice or choose to not practice any faith. That is not something we should take for granted. As some nations, especially socialist and communist nations, have strong penalties for practicing religion or practicing religions that are not deemed the national religion. We enjoy the intellectual freedom to believe what we choose and not be forced to accept something as fact simply because we are told to. Because many times, what the public officials tell us at the time may change with new information and their approach and policy may not. It may be uncomfortable to some people, but we should be able to see past the emotions and want the facts. A society with freedom does not come without its challenges. There are always misperceptions about whose right is supreme to another's rights. As there have been times when public policy did determine whose rights were more important. It is true that the nation built on freedom and is currently the face of freedom did not do a great job of extending that freedom to all Americans. And that is a fair criticism. America neither created slavery nor discrimination, but did not end either early enough. But America has learned from our past indiscretions and have made great progress, which should not be overlooked. We should ensure that all people have equal rights to freedom, but we need to avoid trying to create new forms of discrimination. Our freedoms should push us to do great things. Innovate to push the boundaries of human achievement and improvements on the quality of life. Our freedom should be for the individual and social good, not creating social cost that others are burdened to cover. Too many people cry freedom to do personal and social harm and expect their fellow Americans to cover the costs. America is the land of the free and should continue to be that.
A free nation should have an economic system that embodies that value. A nation built of the people, by the people, and for the people should have an economy directed by the people as well. That is what free market capitalism is. An economic system driven by the people rather than a centralized planner. Free markets have elevated more people out of poverty and created more wealth than any other system. We need more capitalism. Not less. There is no perfect economic system in the world. Every economic system has some positives and some flaws. The important part is to have an economic system that allows individuals the ability to have agency in their economic pursuits. To have economic freedom to determine what the path in life is. That is how you have a productive, innovative, and dynamic economy. America is blessed with a dynamic economy driven by creative, innovative entrepreneurs who see gaps in how things are done and drive solutions to make our society more effective, efficient, and adaptive. They do not wait for some bureaucrat committee to determine what economic problems must be met and what solutions will be worked on. As a result, the American free market capitalist economy is far more resilient and adaptive than any socialist economy, which will fold in the face of any major challenge. Socialist economies wait patiently for a patriarch to make decisions, largely out of fear because there are lethal consequences for misalignment with the people in power. Many basic economic questions are completely unable to be answered for the public because socialist economics does not create solutions, only problems. Look at the inability for socialist economies in Europe to respond at all to the heat crisis plaguing their nations, because the centralized powers dictate that air conditioning is not for their societies. All the while those people making those decisions have their air conditioners at full blast. Why is capitalism the most effective system in the world? Because it is an economic system that empowers the people. Free market capitalism is driven by the people who are either producers generating the products or services in the market or consumers who purchase the goods and services, providing quality signals to tell producers what is truly wanted and needed. Centralized economies do not concern themselves with what you, the individual, truly want or need. If they give you anything at all, it considers the job done. The individual person does not matter in socialist and communist economies. But free market capitalism pushes for outcomes that allow consumers to get what they need and want, and producers to find ways to sustainably make that exchange possible. How does that work? In a market economy, consumers have the ability to obtain customized offerings. The majority of the market does not have to prefer the same thing you prefer, just enough to make it worth providing at an affordable price. That is why there are so many product offerings in almost every possible product category. In a socialist or communist economy, there are going to be fewer options as the costs are centralized. The decision to produce or allow goods in is based on the impact of the government planner rather than the individual. While in theory the government planner is acting on behalf of the people, the reality is that is focused on the gander and willing to sacrifice individual geese. In free markets, the gander and each individual goose have the opportunity to have options that meet the broadest needs. The options may not come from the same producer and not exclusively paid by the government either. So, entrepreneurs who identify a population, even the smallest niche, may decide to produce a good or service that just appeals to that small population, and then grow from there. Now, there are delays in making that exchange fully mutually beneficial. Sometimes the needs of one side or the other exceed the available or affordable options at that moment. Or sometimes ineffective public policies that were never refreshed create market challenges that harm outcomes for both consumers and producers. Time and innovation usually resolves those challenges. An argument made by some is that free market capitalism creates too many wealthy and successful people while there are people who are not able to make ends meet. Income disparities are a concern. We have discussed the benefits of being the owner of a business versus an employee at any level. The benefits related to unique talents versus general lower-skill trade. The false argument some politically make is that socialism and communism eliminate poverty. Those systems do not. Simply the nation's economy divides into laborers and those working and connected to the people in power. Usually a dictator in those economic systems, as the economic system tends to reflect the political governance. Free market economics allows people the opportunity to elevate out of poverty and their existing income levels. And we see this happen every single day in the United States. There is income mobility and the ability to market your transferable skills in order to gain access to different income channels. And the ability to become a business owner to change your economic dynamic. In the United States, there are social safety nets that care for the poor and impoverished. Every society should take care of those in need and those completely unable to care for themselves, but should not allow for the perpetual expansion of government dependence, creating the modern version of oppression, where one is completely dependent on the government for sustenance. People want to be productive and valuable. This is true of all people, but that sentiment is much stronger here, as the desire to be perceived as self-made is highly sought. Being a ward of the state is not a desirable outcome and has a negative stigma. People always want to have a good answer to that question of what do you do and what makes it interesting. And free markets allow people to take whatever talents or potential they have and market it for compensation. The more unique your talent and potential is, as well as how reliable it is compared to others, will help improve the compensation received. That is a reality. And that is not static. It needs to improve over time as other workers are competing for income and opportunity. And others are trying to find innovative ways to shift how things are done, which may make some work obsolete. In free market economics, there is always a risk with change. Some people build a toolkit that affords them the ability to adapt and compete in any environment. Others may find themselves suited best in the current situation. Anything that puts that opportunity at risk puts them in jeopardy. People tend to try to find a job they love and not always follow the market, which can be detrimental. Poor public policies can have a major impact on the economic environment. Free markets are not free when the government intervenes to serve a political need, like those who implement energy policies based on the tantrums of a European child, or try to manipulate wages that will lead to less employment and more automation. Rather than trying to implement irrational wage floors, the focus should be to encourage and promote competition for that labor. Nothing drives wages up like more demand for the same supply. There is a role for the government to help those impacted, but not with perpetual dependency. Rather help them retool and relaunch themselves. Stop making low-skilled labor more costly, as employers will always choose technology over uncovered labor costs. Consumers are not always willing to accept the increases. In the short term, low wages is somewhat better than no wages, as long as the person seeks income mobility. It may seem a bit harsh, but people have a path towards elevation rather than dependency on the government to address your needs and wants, which they never truly care about or concern themselves with actually delivering. Rather than settling for what they deem as the best they are willing to do, let people navigate and find a new path. The obsession with compensation is a slanted argument, as we all agree that people should be paid their worth. The more unique and reliable skill sets earn more. And we should not alter our incentive-based economy that drives innovation simply because a person is jealous of the fruits of another person's labor. If you are not earning what you believe you should be, find a new market for your skills and abilities. You may like your work environment and co-workers, but if the company is not able or willing to pay you what you believe you are worth, put your skills and abilities on the market. You are not a victim. You applied for a job, negotiated or were offered compensation, and accepted that compensation. And you stayed. Embrace free markets, despite the challenges. And people should understand it better and use free markets to their advantage. There is always a market for your skill and abilities. You just have to put in the work and find it.
The United States of America was founded on the principles of freedom and opportunity. Also, our founding fathers wanted to give a voice to the voiceless, as the colonies under the British Empire were subjects, not citizens. A nation with a government built of the people and for the people was a stark difference than the monarchies that dominated much of the world. Americans want to maintain our true democracy and not have the same puppet democracies we see in Russia and other areas of Europe, where the people's voice is never heard past the political manipulation of politicians who predetermine outcomes or have agreements to achieve the same means one way or another. The people elected into office have a responsibility to every citizen in our society, not just the ones who voted for them, but each and every citizen and legal resident. Citizens who elect them have the responsibility to hold them accountable and cast ballots for change when change is needed. Americans are no longer subjects, and most do not want to go back down that path. I said most because there seems to be some people that want to be subjects. For quite some time, we have seen elected officials in America try to establish that same totalitarianism here, either by creating political machines to establish single-party environments, controlling the choice of those residents, or manipulating the census data to allow people not legally permitted to be inside our border to structurally silence the voices of residents. Many people, especially in urban areas, live under totalitarian-style rule, where a single party entirely controls the political system. Many times, the actual registration data and voter records show that the population is not as one-sided as their representation, which is troubling. Yet, these areas seem to be destined to be hubs for the oppressive and dangerous policies that come from socialist ideas. In many ways, there is a responsibility for political parties to compete in every community, in every election, to offer a different choice, and to help prevent radicals from offering blatant lies and misleading narratives to secure footholds and bases to operate from. But political parties operate like brands, at times, focusing solely on those who are easiest to connect with. In an effort to restore the balance, there has been a redistricting push by Republicans to offset years of gerrymandering by Democrats. In some states with nearly 50-50 splits in registered voters, there is only Democrat representation in Congress. So clearly there is a need to restore a level playing field, especially after the years of manipulating the data with illegal immigrants. The chronic claims that our democracy is under threat seems to not be a warning for Americans about President Trump, but what Democrats were already doing and what seems to be the future of their party. The Democratic agenda is currently aimed at pushing ideas and policies that will end democracy and silence any outside of the ruling class. Consider the dynamic out there. We are supposed to believe that the MAGA agenda is radical because it tries to expand opportunities to Americans, reduce dependency on foreign supply chains, lower cost of living, shift focus to our citizens, and protect Americans both domestic and abroad. But the system that calls for political violence, ending Western civilization, nationalizing individual wealth, and censorship is supposed to be normal. They speak about ending Western traditions. How does destroying Western cultures, also known as democracy, make your voice more effectively heard? The honest truth that people who support the radical uprising is that they are naive to the fact that socialist and communist governments do not care what the people want or need. Eventually, they change how the government is formed and no longer need to care. Many of these young and naive people being exploited by socialists are unaware of how many people were murdered to put in place their system of governments. Whether it is Russia, China, Eastern Europe, or previously South America, tens of millions of people lost their lives at the hands of people who govern under that view of the world. How many times are people going to fall for what is clear and obvious? How many people are going to continue to experiment with radical ideas, see their communities descend into dangerous hellholes, and deny what caused the deterioration? The belief that ceding our voice, our choice, and our freedoms in favor of the false comforts of a shared economy and collection of people is a myth. Look at how communism was sold to the people and what actually happened. It is always the same story and the same outcome. Then someone came up with communist light, also known as the first stage of communism, called socialism. Pretend to care what the people want, but the government will do what is in its best interests anyway. Slightly different story and same outcomes. It is vitally important that we stand up to socialism in all its forms as it is truly communism. These proponents of it are not willing to be honest with the public because they know in their hearts they are doing evil. So they try to rebrand it like the tobacco companies did when people started to realize smoking was not the best thing for your health. People are susceptible to radical ideas when they are in a rut, see others doing what they want to do, and cannot escape their mental place to see the path forward. They operate out of jealousy and hysteria, seeking revenge and retribution on those who have done absolutely no harm to them. But socialists will always play groups against each other because, in the end, neither side wins. The socialist usurps power and usually becomes a dictator. Some will say, well, it is not a problem yet because the United States has a dynamic and complex government system. Maybe New York City falls into a socialist hellhole, but it can be contained. Maybe blue states fall into the socialist hellholes, but it may be contained. We must not let anyone fall into these traps. These people can try to rebrand socialism, but it is the same evil and oppressive system. If you truly value democracy and your voice being heard, then you need to reject these radicals.
In closing, I believe we should all love America and value our culture, way of life, opportunity, security, and freedoms. We do not need any form of revolution or fundamental shift in how we operate. Rather, we need to focus on expanding opportunity to individuals, empowering them to experience income mobility, entrepreneurship, investing, and innovation. Americans did not need or want a large oppressive government back during our founding, and we do not need one now. There are important functions that are essential by federal and state governments, but they have proven distracted by seeking to intervene in our everyday lives and manipulating our markets. They need to focus on security, law enforcement, and being efficient with our tax dollars. Leave the rest to us. I am not completely surprised that Americans are enamored by the thought of revolutions because of how they are cultured in our media and entertainment. The idea of revolutions is common in popular series, like Star Wars. The rebels were fighting against the Empire. The Empire was not a democracy or free market economy. It was a totalitarian socialist-style environment if you really look at it. Other movies that discuss the power of corporations taking over the world. Well, that is only possible under environments where the government has great control and is able to pick and choose economic winners to empower who can operate in that environment. If there were free markets and the permittance of competition, those corporations would be unable to sustain. We are not perfect, but we are far from bad. We must not obsess over radical and outright false claims about our society, economy, and way of life. We must allow our shared values and principles rise above petulance and hysteria. Happy 250th birthday to the United States of America. God bless America and all Americans. Thank you for experiencing this episode of the Christopher Peter Review. Your viewership is appreciated and valued. Please follow the Christopher Peter Review on social media and continue to visit www.crcreview.com for new episodes. Thank you once again. Until next time.